Good afternoon. Is that on? Yep. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back after turnaround to our Child Welfare and Foster Care Committee. We've got a few people who aren't here quite yet, but we're going to go ahead and get started because we've got lots to talk about today with child care. I just want to tell you that one of the important things to me as we started the session was the issue of child care, but because we have had so much legislation that this committee only meeting 2 days a week, we needed to address early on. We didn't have the time to be able to do any of the informational hearings, but I had always intended that the first meeting that we come back after turnaround would be an informational hearing on the efforts of child care in Kansas. So I met with Melissa Rooker earlier and we did a little planning, and we could not have planned the day any better than to have it when we had all the child care providers in the Capitol today. So at this time, I'm just going to turn the floor over to Melissa and let her share with us. Thanks, Melissa, for being here and for putting this all together.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I very much appreciate the opportunity to address this committee. I see enough freshmen around the table that our testimony begins with just a brief overview of the role and responsibilities of the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund. I won't do too deep a dive, but we were created in statute in 1999 by the legislature to receive the annuity from the state's share of the master tobacco settlements. So the key fund, the Kansas Endowment for Youth, was created, and out of that, every year you as a legislature adopt the Children's Initiative Fund budget for us. We have a governing board that is made up of 9 voting members. 5 are appointed by the governor. There are 4 legislative appointments, so the usual, the House and Senate leadership and minority leaders each have an appointment. The governor in statute is limited to no more than 3 members that she appoints from a single political party. So we have enjoyed a very balanced run in our history as a governing entity. The terms are 4-year terms, and they were designed to start off in a staggered appointment process so that now we do not turn over wholesale when there is a change of administration. The governing board each year is instructed to use data to drive decision-making. Statute requires a comprehensive evaluation of the investments made through the Children's Initiative Fund, so we conduct that each year. It's the content of the annual report, which I handed out to this committee that very first meeting when we all got to introduce ourselves. That is the document that we produce annually that captures the work that we do and what is known as our accountability process. We are really pleased to be here, and I am here speaking on behalf of a partnership among 3 other major state agencies. The role of the Children's Cabinet, why am I here speaking for DCF, KDHE, and KSDE when it comes to child care? In statute, we are designated to be the entity that coordinates, that convenes, that collaborates, that identifies barriers and gaps and silos in the way we deliver services to children and their families in Kansas. So I am here speaking on behalf of the system, and my goal here today is to share with you efforts that we've been engaged in a very intentional way with funding to support it from a federal grant known as the Preschool Development Grant. It is we are a number of years into this work. We have developed a wealth of research and data and information that we have gathered, and we have shifted from information gathering. We've identified problems. We are really hard at work together to identify some of the stresses in the system and address those things that we have identified that we can do better than we are. The grant is known as Preschool Development Grant Birth to 5. It's a federal program under the umbrella of Health and Human Services and to some extent the U.S. Department of Education, but it is channeled through the Administration for Children and Families. We were working, and I say we, it predates my appointment to the role that I currently inhabit with the Children's Cabinet as the Executive Director. But in 2018, then Governor Collier sponsored an application to the National Governors Association for the Cabinet, DCF, KDHE, and KSDE to join a national mentoring project to study cross-sector collaboration and identify ways that we as a state could do better. 5 states were chosen, Kansas is one of them, and of the projects that were adopted as the activities of that mentoring session for that year, one of the things identified was that the agencies came together and applied for the Preschool Development Grant Program. We were awarded a $4 million grant in 2019 to do a 1-year planning session. So out of that work, I brought all of these reports live online on our Children's Cabinet website. I also do have hard copies, so if anyone is interested, I still have copies available of everything I'm going to show you, and I would be happy to deliver anything to your office that you request. But we started with a comprehensive statewide needs assessment so that we could identify the baseline. And the beauty of this is that this work took place in 2019, so it's the baseline prior to the pandemic, and we have found that that is incredibly important to have. We identified, we arranged the report to cover the key findings and the major themes. The 2 key findings that underpin everything else that we have identified is that too many Kansas families are raising their children and are struggling to meet their basic needs. So that's housing, transportation, healthcare, food, those basic needs. And that struggle to address basic needs leads to the kinds of things that this committee generally focuses time on in the child welfare realm. It's the sequence of events that leads to crisis and dangerous situations in families, or the struggle with the issues of poverty too often are treated as a reason to remove children from the home when we know we can provide support and keep families together if we approach things a little differently. So our needs assessment focused on the areas that we identified were access to services across the state, availability of services across the state, navigation of the system being very difficult for families, that families are left to connect the dots by themselves, so to speak. We have systems level problems with the way, we identified areas where the agencies were working at cross purposes or, in their own lane and not looking up and seeing what else was happening. Just so certain state systems level changes that we identified would be helpful. We identified that we have a problem with shortage of facilities, like the physical spaces and the equipment, the curriculum and the materials in the spaces that do exist, just outdated old curriculum and shortage of supplies and things like that. And then finally, we recognize that data, as important as it is, as much as it gets collected, we aren't using it. We aren't leveraging what we collect in a manner that helps define and helps with decision-making at the policy level. So, and then we did add a section on the bright spots because we did extensive listening across the state and information gathering. We did 53 community engagement sessions, so we traveled the state, met with 53 different communities. We structured those so they were all the same set of questions asked, and we gathered all the information. We had online ability, a program called Our Tomorrows allowed people to weigh in from anywhere online and give us some insight into their experiences raising their families in Kansas. And we gathered existing surveys and we did site visits and we collected needs assessments from various programs, and that was the underpinning of our comprehensive needs assessment. We turned that into a 5-year strategic plan for early childhood that all of the agencies signed on to. So this is, again, aligned in the same set of topics that our needs assessment is organized by. This was our 5-year plan. We delivered this plan in February of 2020 and to the Children's Cabinet for adoption. And you guys recognize what happened next. We did successfully apply for and receive a 3-year implementation grant in the Preschool Development Grant Program. So we have been working to, that grant is not to expand slots in programs for children and families. That grant is designed to help states do the systems level work that's identified. So we have been hard at work, but at a slower pace because of the need to shift attention to deal with the ramifications of the pandemic. But I will say that having the baseline, the needs assessment and the strategic plan was the anchor around which the agencies came together to map out the appropriate responses. So whether it was the immediate crisis response when the CARES Act was passed and we were struggling to just help programs access the cleaning supplies, and even at some point there were food shortages for child care programs, all of that, there was crisis response that happened. Then we moved into from that crisis response, then it's relief that was needed, and that really is the CRISA and the ARPA bills that were passed federally that moved significant amounts of money to the states. And there has been a focus on making sure that child care providers in the state have had the assistance that we can provide through that. Through all that, we did annual more limited needs assessment updates so that we could keep tabs on the effect of the pandemic and just make sure that we were taking the temperature in the system itself. I want to make sure to note that child care programs were never subject to shutdown orders. There were waivers that were offered that the federal program allowed the states to issue waivers under the emergency declaration that made things a little bit easier to manage. So it was some waivers that allowed the child care subsidy system to be adjusted to address the needs to make sure frontline workers had child care available. We were able to increase the income limit for qualification for subsidy up to 250% of federal poverty level. We were able to shift from basing your eligibility to the number of hours that your child attended childcare to an enrollment-based system, which is easier for providers. So if a child is enrolled, if we weren't incentivizing keeping them there if they were sick, because you would lose, and if your child wasn't in attendance, your subsidy was docked under the old system. It's now enrollment based, so a sick child is allowed to stay home and that parent's subsidy is not docked, and the provider can get the full monthly allowance that they deserve. So there were a lot of positive changes in the subsidy system. The licensing agency is KDHE. They did work to offer waivers to make sure that we were, when site visits were problematic, there were ways to keep doors open of programs through other means. So name-based background checks were conducted when fingerprinting was a problem, et cetera. So lots of activity being done to support our child care providers through that crisis. The work of PDG has continued, and one of the things, and I do have a handout that I didn't include with the digital testimony, but I will get the committee assistant as soon as I get back to my office. It's the one that's on top of your pile. We have engaged to address the data system needs, we created an early childhood data trust agreement. That data trust is a legal framework that was entered into by our 4 key agencies up front, and then we've added Department of Corrections to it in the last year. It is a framework that sets out the parameters for data sharing when we want to bring, maybe it's foster care data married with the Children's Cabinet universe of data. It outlines ethical use and the appropriate legal protections. It encompasses all of the federal and state data privacy laws. So it sets out the baseline agreement for any data sharing that happens. And then for each individual project, each question that we're studying, an individual use case agreement a legal agreement is entered into for data sharing. This is the findings of the pilot project that we adopted so that we could test how this arrangement worked. It was an agreement entered into between DCF and the Children's Cabinet. We did marry up the foster care data that DCF has with the Children's Cabinet data from both our early childhood block grants and the community-based child abuse prevention work that we do. You can see the findings are pretty remarkable. In the first initial findings, we discovered that families that received the services that the Cabinet invests in, which are built around the blueprint of healthy development, strong families, and early learning. So it's a lot of parent education, it's home visiting, it's a variety of programs that really speak to helping give children access to programs where they get high quality early education and childcare, but also supporting parents and providing the kinds of programs that help break certain cycles. We discovered that families that were on the receiving end of services through the Children's Initiative Fund were 23% less likely to see their children removed into foster care. We wanted to know why, what made the difference, what were we investing in that really paid off the most, and you can see the home visiting is the single biggest ROI of anything we're investing in. That providing universal home visiting and there are varying degrees of prescriptiveness in the universe of home visiting programs. There are 8 models in use in the state, but parents that had access to that kind of support and parent education, and those visits where there could be screening for maternal depression or substance abuse issues or just lack of knowledge of developmental stages in a child's earliest days, that connecting them to resources makes a huge difference. We also looked at the most common reasons for removal, and 37% of removals are due to substance abuse issues within the home. 16% are physical abuse cases. 16% it's lack of supervision. 13% is physical neglect, and 11% is just the caretaker's inability to cope. So what we are finding is that when we can intervene and provide access to services and referrals to the kind of care that's needed, when we decriminalize being poor and not being able to afford certain things, when we can provide support so that the adults in the household can go to job training and get jobs and get the help that they need, that we can keep families intact. So that was one of the big aha moments. We are currently engaged in a project that we refer to as the unduplicated count of children receiving services. So that is a much more complex type of project, but we're trying to bring all of our data sets together in aggregate so that we can begin to identify where there are gaps in service, where we have high concentrations of families that need, hopefully are receiving multiple forms of service, but just identifying where service is being provided and to whom. That is a question we can tell you how many kids are currently in foster care. We can tell you how many kids are currently enrolled in Parents as Teachers, et cetera, but I can't tell you how many kids are receiving 3 of those services, or and answer any questions like that. And we, as a team, really would like to be able to leverage the data that we have access to in a much more intentional, thoughtful way to make the decision-making more data-driven. So Kansas has been implementing the preschool development grant for the last 3 years. We're in the final year. Because of the pandemic, we will apply for and we should receive an extension, a no-cost extension from the federal program to extend the life of that grant just 1 more year so that we can complete some of the projects that were delayed. And then this year, at the end of December, we were notified that we were awarded a new 1-year planning grant. So we are using this year, calendar year 2023, to do a post-pandemic comprehensive needs assessment to update the strategic plan so that we can factor in progress made and reset the goals to the next set of work projects that need to be taken care of. We have also, as a state, been part of a national cohort that the Annie E. Casey Foundation put together in partnership with ACF. It's called Thriving Families, Safer Children. That has been a phenomenal team effort. Again, our same 4 agencies plus KCSL and some other partners are teamed up, and the purpose of Thriving Families, Safer Children is to shift the mindset from the old school thinking about child welfare to how do we transform our system into a system that focuses on child well-being. So the idea is to begin to invest more and drive policy towards supporting families before they reach that inflection point, that crisis that necessitates the system to get involved and investigate and remove children and do all of those things. We don't want children in harm's way to begin with. So how do we move our system in that direction? It has been a really inspiring, thought-provoking process to be part of this cohort. I think there are 18 other states all told that are participating, and it is also information that we have helped weave into the work that we're engaged in. We are working, the Children's Cabinet focuses on prevention efforts. We do not get involved in those issues that need to be addressed once there is a report that a child is in danger. So we leave that to the professionals at other state and local organizations, but we do attempt to focus our investments on prevention work. And we are really, really focused on making sure that we provide a continuum of care that will help families address multiple needs. So to that end, we have identified one of the key findings in the needs assessment and strategic plan was around the child care workforce. It comes as no surprise we have problems. They predate the pandemic. They're national. They're not just limited to Kansas. It is a profession. If I looked at the U.S. Department of Labor statistics website a couple weeks ago for a different presentation and discovered that nationally, and the same is true here on the ground in Kansas, but nationally, dog walkers, pet sitters, that category of care earn $26,000 to $27,000 a year is the national average. For childcare, it's $22,000 to $23,000 a year. Just let that sink in. I mean, we are paying people more to take care of our pets than we're paying them to take care of our children. So consequently, it becomes difficult to recruit people to the profession. But we need people in the profession. We need children to receive the highest quality possible care in their earliest days. We know how much brain development occurs in those first 1,000 days of life. We know how important it is that every interaction a child has is positive, because that affects brain development. That sets up brain architecture that will lead to their performance in school, and there are studies that are going on 50 years of the High-Scope Perry study that shows the outcomes track all the way through adult life. It's earnings, it's educational attainment, it's whether or not you have interaction with the criminal justice system, it is health outcomes, it all stems from the quality of those early childhood experiences. So we would like every environment that a child is in to be a learning environment that is high quality. So that could be helping parents within their own home know how to spend 15 minutes every day reading to their child and having healthy serve and return style interactions that stimulate the baby's brain development. It's when you're out at the grocery store, we want positive interactions when children are out in the world around them, and we certainly want child care and early learning programs to be the highest quality possible. We have focused effort intensely on how we address the child care needs that exist in our state, and there has been a high level of coordination. So one of the problems we identified was the length of time it takes to get through the fingerprint and background check process when someone is trying to hire. KBI came to the table, local law enforcement came to the table. Ed Klump helped us organize a survey of law enforcement agencies around the state. We test piloted, DCF had live scan fingerprint equipment in their regional offices, so we entered into the legal agreement for that equipment to be used by KDHE licensing as sites where people could go to get the fingerprints done electronically. Because we were paper-based. People still had to put ink on their fingers and put their fingerprint on a card and mail that in. And that took time. So with the pilot being successful and the help of KBI and law enforcement, we identified across the state, we identified stations where they were willing to engage in non-criminal background checks and offer the live scan equipment. It requires legal agreements so that the right agency is involved in the reporting, and there's a cost. So the billing, all of those things had to be ironed out through legal agreements. But we got that done and rolled out statewide electronic fingerprint processing for child care providers last fall, and that has made a gigantic difference to the time from interviewing someone to having them qualified to come to work for you. We have also, I mentioned that we have been engaged in using pandemic relief funding to support covering the cost of those background checks, so there are no costs to providers until that funding runs out. We also have provided some grant funding to help cover other forms of startup costs to help ensure that people can enter the profession more easily. We are currently using our planning grant, our preschool development planning grant, to underwrite for KDHE a comprehensive review of the rules and regs. There is another handout there. It's the third one, yes, that one. I want to show you what one of the preliminary projects was to map out where the rules and regs live for child care licensing. This is a complex schematic, and I think the complexity is the most compelling reason to share this with you. We have federal, we have state, we have local. We have fire and safety, we have zoning, we have occupancy and occupational safety. You have the child care licensing program that the state agency is responsible for, but there are other other entities that are involved in the rules and regulatory landscape. So we are engaged in a comprehensive review supporting KDHE to look at the state rules and regs. We have to stay in compliance with the feds, and there are some areas that we are being asked to address by our federal partners. We have to stay in compliance with the fire marshal. We have to work with locals to make sure that there is good interaction with what they're planning. One of the city council members from the city of Wichita was in the building this morning, and I thanked her because Wichita is a city that has more strict local regulations than the state does. And the city council is actively engaged in updating their local regulations to better align with what the state has, and that will make it easier for child care providers in Sedgwick County. So we are grateful for the work going on down there. That process will map out a comprehensive menu of proposals that we will move through the rule and reg process in a very organized and intentional fashion is the goal of that. We are currently building an online workforce registry for child care providers. This is another place where we were still paper-based, and it was very clunky and time-consuming for providers to prove that they had done their annual certification work. So we are building an online registry where they can house all their hours and certifications, and we can make that process easier. It will be teamed with a career pathway for childcare that maps out meeting childcare providers where they are. So if it's a provider who's been in the field for 15 years, there is a point in the pathway for that provider to enter and see, steps forward to better their certification level if they desire. If it's someone going through higher ed, great, we have a pathway. You can stop after a 2-year degree, you can get a PhD. There is a place for you on the pathway. If you are a high school graduate and you want to enter the profession, we want to welcome you in, and there's a route for you on the pathway. That will work in concert with the registry, and it is all part of child care quality improvement, which our friends at DCF are responsible for through the federal child care development block grant funding that they receive. We have been providing technical assistance to communities to help them come together and deal with child care issues that are happening in their state. Child Care Aware of Kansas is the partner. We started with PDG funding to pilot this project, and DCF has picked up with funding that will support community convenings across the state. It's called Communities in Action. We bring business leaders, we bring local government, we bring education, we bring child care, we bring business. Chambers of Commerce are some of the lead entities. And it's mentoring to help those communities come together and address, usually it's the business community driving it. We need workers, we need to hire, and we keep hearing we can't because people don't have childcare. So we meet the community where they are. Yesterday it was Johnson County. There are communities all across the state that have participated and benefited from these communities in action programs, and there's funding to go with it if there are projects that are identified and grants are necessary. So that is something that is being funded. We are focused on improving rural child care and improving certain categories of care that are difficult to find. Infant care, non-traditional hours. I mentioned rural child care for children with special health care needs. And so we have been trying to fund programs that speak to those needs. I want to also mention there are there's multiple different forms of licensed child care. So there's licensed home-based child care. There are group homes. That's a child care provider in their home, but they have 2 providers, not just the one person. Then you have center-based care, you have after-school and out-of-school time care, you have drop-in care. So drop-in is things like Boys and Girls Clubs, for example, do phenomenal work and provide childcare to school-aged children year-round. It's before, they're located usually in or near schools, and that after-school care piece that's so important for working parents, and then summertime hours. So we've tried to provide grant funding opportunities to support all categories of care. I know Boys and Girls Clubs is one category that is working right now with some challenges in terms of funding sources that are changing criteria and the expiration of certain funds and things like that. But we value all forms of childcare because every community has needs that are slightly different. We've been working, KDHE's been in the lead on working out parameters to pilot a model called the small center model. This would fill a gap that exists because it's a big leap to go from that licensed care in your home to running a center. The span of kids it takes especially in a rural community, you might not have enough children, but you may want to pilot. So we're trying to pilot a small center model, so it's from 13 to 23 children in care, and that will, we've mapped out what needs to happen. It'll take some waivers to certain regulations in place. We've identified funding that will support it, and we're going to roll this out in a number of communities across the state to see how it's embraced. We also routinely work with the Department of Commerce. So we have helped support them as they have created carve-outs and set-asides in their community service tax credit program and the community development block grant funds that are specific to support child care programs around the state. And they have helped us as we are building out our newest opportunity, which is Spark funding for something that we're calling the Child Care Accelerator. So the cabinet is on the receiving end of $20 million of Spark funds. That it's the first funding that I've encountered in my tenure that we are going to be allowed to use to help fund construction and major renovation. So it is, we also have a workforce problem, but in communities that need to build out more space, it is rare to find funds, and this is the first set. So $20 million worth of grants will be awarded for construction, and DCF has matched up $20 million from their ARPA pandemic relief CCDF funds to help us also give operational lift to those communities that need workforce training and development, and we want to build facilities that have viable programs, open doors. So we want to help with startup costs in a major way. The accelerator will be a team effort. We will all collaborate, and we ask for letters of interest. We, the cabinet, will be the lead. The governing board will review the recommendations and make the awards ultimately. We ask for a letter of interest. High interest. Let me just say we're not going to have enough money to fund it all, but we are filtering right now what really doesn't fit the criteria of the program and what might be better served by, we're trying to match local requests with the right source of funding. So we are working to get an RFP posted March 10th. The period will close May 15th, and then we'll go through the review and the awarding process this summer. Hopefully in June, we'll get awards made. So I often get asked what lawmakers can do to help, and I know that there is sincere effort afoot to make a meaningful difference. I think the big picture is important. Policy decisions in other realms have ripple effects that end up impacting child care needs. So we thank you for the child care business tax credit that you passed last year, an expansion of it to make it easier for businesses to support child care efforts. They will capture a tax credit from the state for those efforts. We thank you for the Promise Scholarship, because that is a pipeline in higher education that is open to folks pursuing the child development and education degrees. We thank you for focus on career and tech ed, because high school programs lead and you have child development as one of the, I think it's under family and consumer science, but it is a pathway in CTE programs. My caution would be that it's easy to get sidetracked and focused on high wage, high demand careers, things that are really attractive right now to want to prioritize are things like cybersecurity and all these different careers that have really good wages when the certifications are earned. We are asking that you not leave critical needs out of the picture. Childcare is critical. It is the baseline for economic development is that families have safe childcare for their children. So we need to remember that not every profession that is worthy of support leads to the highest wages, but there are certain areas that need support regardless. We would like to work on the wage issue. There are state models across the country where there are programs in place. I'm happy to discuss with more specificity what can happen with wage supplement programs. When you are, particularly in this committee and the sister committee, the Welfare Reform Committee, some of the policies that are put in place have a ripple effect on childcare. So to maintain TANF and SNAP benefits, you have to go back to work 6 weeks postpartum. That means you've just had a brand new baby and you've got to find childcare. So we understand the value of work and we understand the need to have criteria, but it is one of the most difficult forms of care to find, and it can have consequences that you maybe hadn't thought of when the policy was put in place. Things like, we heard in the Early Childhood Caucus, I wish I could have imported the senators and representatives that attended the lunch and learn, because that was a really good discussion there. And one of the, I don't know if it was a parent or provider, had a story about a parent who was earning a degree that was going to lead, like a CNA or something that was leading to higher wage job, but she had to cut back her work hours, so she lost benefits because she wasn't working enough hours. We would love to ensure that those kinds of workforce development programs are recognized where they need to be recognized, so that people can continue to afford to do the training that is needed. Childcare workers generally don't earn benefits, so healthcare access is a factor. So I would put childcare workforce squarely in the gap. So when you're talking about Medicaid, these are able-bodied adults who are gainfully employed, working at minimum 40 hours a week. But when your pay scale is $10 and something cents an hour, you are not earning enough to go buy on the public marketplace, and you're not eligible because you're earning too much to qualify for benefits as it is. So I just share that because there are a variety of options. I'm not just standing here to say Medicaid expansion. I am telling you that there are other policy proposals that could be brought to bear. There are fiscal notes attached. I don't have specific dollars, but childcare workers could become qualified for state benefits the way teachers are, perhaps. There are other kinds of policy solutions, but what we know is most childcare providers earn their hourly wage. It averages $10 an hour in the state, and they get no benefits, not paid time off, not retirement, not health care. They're just earning their hourly pay. We would like to see more improved investment in home visiting. We are conducting an evaluation of the 8 models and where delivery is happening and what programs are utilizing them, and multiple agencies are involved. So that is part of the big picture overview. So those are some of those issues that we see as important. I will leave you with a quick note about the governor's task force. The Executive Order 2301 was the first executive order signed of her second term. She's put together a task force to look at the governance of early childhood in the state of Kansas. Early childhood is spread. So we are so spread across so many agencies that even in a world in which we are actively working together, it is very difficult, even when common agreement is reached on a particular goal, getting all of the wheels in motion, working in the same direction at the same rate of speed to get to that goal can be difficult. And even with the best of intentions, we have work to do to improve the system. So I am not here alone today. We have representation from all three agencies, KSDE, KDHE, and DCF are all present to back up any questions that may be technical in nature that need to phone a friend. We can do that. But at this time, I would stand for questions.
Okay, great. This is a lot. Yeah,
I'm sorry,
it's a lot
yeah.
to take in. Committee, do we have questions? Yes, Representative Neighbor.
These are fun facts for her to answer. Did you used to be a legislator?
Yes, I did, Representative.
Did you used to work and write and do things for Clint Eastwood?
Yes, ma'am.
How many years?
15.
And do you get a Christmas card from him every year?
He never sent Christmas cards, so no.
Oh, you're not on his wish list? Thank you. I just thought people needed to know that she has a very diverse
Background, yeah.
background.
Okay, questions? Representative Ousley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Rooker, for being here. As you're talking about the average salary of a child care worker, do you know the average age? Because I know, like in a Fight for 15, fast food worker issues, everybody, a lot of people would say, well, these are just teenage kids, out of high school and this and that. And as a matter of fact, a lot of them aren't. So I want to see if again, these aren't high school kids. This isn't somebody watching, their neighbor's kids for a couple hours after school. This is somebody trying to earn a living.
It is. I would say half our workforce is over the age of 50. And that's one of the things we identified in 2019. Our workforce is aging out at a faster rate than people are entering. So it is critical that we support and build the pipeline so that we can bring people back into the profession. And it's really difficult to compete when you've got new employers entering a community and starting wages are 20 or so an hour, or the fast food, the car wash across from where I fill up my car that just opened. They just built a new car wash, and $15.50 was the starting pay for car wash attendants. So it is a problem because we're competing in a tight labor market.
And I imagine everybody who's earning a salary has to listen to somebody cry at one point in time or another, but the child care worker probably has a little higher tolerance. Yeah. Thank you.
Didn't they say in the early learning caucus that it was $10.30? Is that what he said? Okay.
Yep.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. So there's one thing that I would love some data on, and you may have mentioned some of it, but what in the big picture, child care workers, you're saying our child care workers, but many of them work in private, whatever, homes or churches or daycare centers. So are there daycare centers that are strictly state-run?
No.
Okay, just licensed.
They're licensed, but they can be for-profit or not-for-profit, but the state does not run childcare.
Okay, and you license the facility, but not not the child care worker?
There are licensing requirements. There's hours every year that need to be earned for training so that you stay current. So I might, yeah, I would invite KDHE. Melissa's the expert.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Schoenberger, and I am the Assistant Director for the Child Care Licensing Program at KDHE. To answer your question, we have multiple ways that people enter within our license program. You can be a sole proprietor. I could own my own childcare, or you could fall under an LLC. You could have a oversight by a board. You can be in your own residence. You can be in a commercial setting. So it really, we look at the licensee, and then the requirements fall under how they defined their business.
Okay, that's super helpful. And then how many people fall under that category in Kansas right now?
Oh, I was just going to say.
Last night, I went to Child Care Aware's website. Anyone can download this. I brought the state level child care supply demand report, which is the current snapshot of how many licensed providers there are, how many slots are filled, how many are open. We can talk about desired capacity versus licensed capacity in a minute, but you can also get this at the county level on the Child Care Aware website.
Super helpful, thank you.
But I think your question was more geared towards the private ownership versus the.
And does this break that out into that at all?
No.
Okay,
it's not.
okay.
I mean, we could get that data to you. We would have to run a report, but we could sure get that data.
If it's not difficult and you could, that would be great, but it's not super urgent, but it's just interesting. And then my last question, if I may, has to do with, okay, so you mentioned that child care providers don't get benefits. And then you said, well, maybe they could be in the state. I'm like, but they're not state employees. So what how, tell me what you're thinking about that.
Well, I mean, they're not. You're right. But I think we've looked at this, and it is a policy choice that could be made to consider them eligible, and I can bring you back more of a proposal on that. We can also look at some of the costs. I think that's fair to think about, but I would be happy to bring more information. I don't want to try and.
Interesting. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have comments and questions. May I have more than one? One at a time. One at a time. You are aware of the Senate Bill 164 that we testified to this morning. I was able to get up there, that the $2,000 tax credit. I think that looks very promising. And comments on that bill.
Yes, I appreciate the thought. I appreciate there's nothing in that bill I object to. I don't have the data that tells us, and I've asked Department of Revenue if they can help us. I don't know if we can gather the information. I don't know how many child care providers that will help. Because you have to reach, the tax credit is against your tax liability to the state. And if you're earning so little, I don't know how many of our providers need, pay enough in that they will benefit from having that credit. I love it for those that do. It will be incredibly helpful.
Well, I'm very hopeful for it. The next thing, I do appreciate KDHE, and I've had a couple meetings. There's several of us representatives and senators that are very committed to the daycare issue. And I really am waiting to see some of the changes that we're going to have, because not everything was functioning the way it needed to be, and I appreciate that. If I was given my choice, I would like to see the grants come back that we had last year, because from a personal standpoint, that saved our daycare. I live daycare with my wife at our church, and she has a good day, I have a good evening.
For sure.
But we were, as a church group with up to 125, we were fighting to get in enough workers, et cetera. And we had a couple that were ready to leave. And then when those bonuses came out, we had one worker that decided to stay.
We've given $29.2 million in provider appreciation bonus payments. There was more capacity in that grant program. I think conversation is underway about what to do, how to reallocate the funds that have not been captured. I think most of the applications at this point have been processed. Yes. So we will engage, but I appreciate that feedback because I think that was important.
And I appreciate everything that you do. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Representative Naper.
On the state insurance, health insurance, I think that might be a little too high in cost.
I mean, given the
I
number
know
of
teachers
providers.
have looked at, I mean, school districts have looked at it, and it's higher than what we can do on the market.
I just want to help you brainstorm.
Oh, I know, but
Yeah, no,
they-
I think that's fair, but I don't want you to think that we have tunnel vision, that there's only one right answer. There can be multiple choices made that can help improve a family. Childcare tax credit would be helpful for families to help afford. You know, we can go down the path of a lot of different what ifs. We considered this or that. I would say as you inevitably reach the point in the session where there are tax cut proposals on the table, please keep in mind that we can't do any of that if we cut taxes to such a degree that there isn't enough revenue left to help support either expansion of existing programs or the creative thoughts around what else we could be doing. So not calling for tax increases, I know better, but certainly asking that in that conversation around tax cuts, if we maybe maybe don't cut quite as far, or preserve a little bit of taxing authority. We see states leveraging it. It could be income tax, property tax, sales tax. States are doing creative things with their tax code all across the country. Local jurisdictions have adopted, voted on levying sales tax or whatever. I think that there's a world of conversation around how to leverage the tax code. There's another whole conversation around Medicaid billing codes. So it has nothing to do with the expansion conversation, everything to do with what authority we have in our billing codes to bill for services in certain locations, and we can do much better as a state. There are a list of changes that are being identified that we should entertain. So,
Are you done? Just one more. In a meeting just before this one, there was a discussion about, Medicaid expansion. And I know that's probably not on the table, but what we did learn is there is a new allotment coming out, and Kansas could get $450 billion, which would more than pay for Medicaid expansion for the next 8 years. And if we don't take advantage of that, I think we're terribly short-sighted.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One quick, you talked briefly about the CTE, Career Technical Education. Which program class do you remember is in that pathway?
well, I think it's child development, and I think it falls under FACS, Family and Consumer Science. So school districts, I think Wichita is one where they actually, high school kids work in the school's early childhood program, and they gain experience.
Do you know, and the reason I'm asking is because I've worked with CTE, and I didn't see it in my district, and I have talked with a group in Wyandotte County that has the certification program for child daycare worker certification, and that's what I'm interested in. So can you guide me or get that to me, because I want to bring it to our schools?
I've got Amanda Peterson, Early Childhood Director for Kansas Department of Education.
Hello. Thank you, Melissa. I'm Amanda Peterson. I'm the Director of Early Childhood for the Kansas State Department of Education. So would you like data on the number of schools that offer the early childhood development pathway?
Yes, I do. I
Terrific.
would be more than glad to get out in my schools and get with them so we can get that started in Leavenworth County.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you could get that to like our office, my office, and then we'll get it out to the entire committee. Are you done? Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Rooker, it's somewhat akin to the question you were just asked, but I have heard from most child care providers on a bigger level. I mean, they're taking kids from, whatever, 3 months on to 5 years or school age. There's a real economic point at which they can kind of make money on 4 and 5 year olds, but newborns, it's impossible to charge really what the actual cost is. So is there a problem with, I know a lot of school districts, I mean, kindergarten has gone to be, instead of half day, being full day, and a fair number of school districts, and maybe your assistant there from the Department of Education would know, but is there not potentially a problem that by lowering or having basically quote unquote free public education down to age 4 is going to somehow destroy the economics behind child care centers?
Representative, I appreciate you identifying that. Yes, that is a concern, and we share it. I think what you were wondering, there are 262 school districts that have a preschool program. So not quite all of them, but most of them in the state, because there's so much value. But remember, that is a partial day, and that is a school year. That is not childcare. So we are encouraging and trying to help foster partnerships with community childcare providers, because parents still need more care than that. So that education is important, and we have some examples in the state of good community partners that help offer professional development opportunities for area childcare providers to join the preschool teachers on staff and do things like that. So we are very mindful of that problem, which is why you haven't yet seen us calling for universal preschool. It's a fantastic benefit for children to have that kind of early learning preparation for kindergarten, but it would be disastrous without the right kind of preparation to make sure we don't put childcare in a dangerous financial position.
Basically, 2 other questions. One is, I'm from Reno County, and the child care, well, it's a big issue everywhere. But I've been in Reno County, it's definitely a big issue. And of course, a lot of things have happened, with spark funds and these sort of COVID rain of money that's come down from the federal government. So when that money ends, I mean, is it you're coming to Topeka looking for that money, or it was great when we had it, we don't need it anymore? I mean, what's going to be the final upshot of all this federal money that's been flowing down?
Well, speaking on behalf of all of our agency partners, we have been incredibly careful to avoid creating sustainability problems. Our programs, our relief programs, all of our efforts have been around one-time use of one-time funds. So Representative Johnson brought up the point that it would be nice to have another round of provider appreciation bonus grants. We have providers getting sustainability grants. We would love to continue offering those things. We would have loved to have created a program where we used those funds for a wage supplement program, but the reason we didn't was because we would have created that cliff. And how do you fill it when those funds disappear? So we have been mindful of our responsibility not to create that kind of financial dilemma for the state lawmakers to grapple with. And I think we have done a laudable job of making sure that our funding is providing support as we can, but in ways that are designed to be temporary.
Final question. I know, or I believe, Elise, KDHE, or maybe it was DCF, did some tweaking to the rules and regs as far as on, how many kids per adult, in childcare centers. And I have heard that, different states have different metrics, which, of course, affects the viability of a daycare center as a business. And I'm just wondering if you think there's anything more that can be done in that direction as far as to help make childcare more viable? Because again, you do have the example of a lot of other states that don't necessarily follow the same metrics that Kansas does.
So that is a set of proposed rule and reg updates that they've gotten to a certain phase. They're on hold. We've pulled back to do a comprehensive review because that was just the infant, one particular rule that pertains to home-based licensed care. So we're doing a more global review. That's that graph that I handed out early on. Just mapping the landscape we're working with. What our approach is designed to come back with a comprehensive list of updates. We need to modernize. It's been Lexi's Law was passed in 2010, and it's been a very long time since we did a comprehensive review, so it's time. We have been notified on a couple different issues. We are out of compliance with federal rules, so we need to update to make sure that we remain in good standing. And there's common sense. There's areas in that matrix, there are bound to be areas where we are creating conflict that we can control and we can reduce. So we are engaged actively in that comprehensive review so that we can come back with a more complete set of updates that we bring forward. That was one of the main responses from the Legislative Rules and Regs Committee was, why are these so narrowly focused on this one category of care? We heard that, and we took that to heart. The public comment period raised a number of issues. The ratio was proposing changing from the current standard of 3 infants to 1 adult to turn that into 4 infants for 1 adult. Let me just frame this. This is the state landing in a place where our official position, our legal position is that 1 adult is capable of grabbing 3, or in that case, 4 infants in their arms and evacuating a burning building. Those regulations exist for safety reasons. They are all about how many children should 1 adult be responsible for at each phase of development. So before kids are ambulatory on their own, it is the adult's responsibility. And I think it's a decision we should not be making lightly when we talk about increasing those ratios.
Melissa, when you talk about reviewing these, is it the cabinet or you personally, or who's reviewing?
Subject matter expert. We have engaged a contractor who has a career's worth of experience and knowledge about Kansas rules and regs and is experienced at that. So she's helping support the review process. We have financial capacity to bring in additional support if needed. So it is third-party eyes that are helping identify and map out what is proposed, and that will be then turned over to KDHE for potential action.
What's the timeline on that?
It's not fast enough for my liking. Do we have, we're hoping that in this calendar year we get to completion of change, that change gets approved. We know the agency can, within its own universe of steps in the rule and reg promulgation process, we can help the agency get through their steps as quickly as possible. There are other entities involved, and sometimes things get hung up at the review in other offices. But Melissa, yes, please.
Just to give this committee some reference, we do license 9 different program types. And so we're really wanting to take a comprehensive approach because some of our regulations with Lexi's law, with reauthorization, have been modernized, but we have some that are older than I am. So we really need to take a deep dive over all cross-cutting program types. And this will also make sure that we align with our funding agency with DCF and our Office of Child Care commitments also to ensure that we're meeting the federal requirements for the health and safety standards. So again, as Melissa said, it's hard to pinpoint a timeline because this is really cross-cutting work that we've never just completed a complete deep dive at one time of looking at all of our program types. So I'm very hopeful that we can still get this done within a reasonable amount of time and then bring it back over here for review. And then public comment. And we have a really amazing systems improvement team that is under the current governance of early childhood. And we have lots of partnership from all over the state and providers intimately involved. So we will be relying a lot on them also. It's not just outside entities. It's really looking at the stakeholders involved at a very early onset because that's the only way we're going to be successful.
Okay, great. Thank you. Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. Melissa, I'm new to this committee, obviously. And I'm looking at this point in time childcare data sheet, and perhaps I don't know what I'm looking at. It's very possible. But I'm thinking of like licensed family daycares or childcare. Are they on this list?
They should be.
Particularly?
Yeah, I
Okay.
actually didn't.
Like
see
the, under the licensed family, is that like homes? Is that what that's talking about? That's the only thing that looked like it might be to me. Or licensed family group.
Yep.
So when we go down here to the bottom, it says child care facility, and it's talking about provide care during evening hours, provide care overnight, provide care on the weekends. Is that including those groups?
Yes.
That's really scary
Isn't it
numbers.
scary? Yeah, so we would love, we've got a couple pilots with foundation grants that, one of them is to incentivize infant care. So a private family foundation has given Child Care Aware a grant. We're gonna, they've got a game plan to create financial incentives for opening up additional slots for infants in 6 rural counties because it is so difficult to find. We could do that same sort of thing. We can create differential scales that incentivize financially a provider who operates non-traditional hours or whatnot. We also are working with the business community. There are examples. I toured a child care facility just the week of their grand opening on the Missouri side of Kansas City that was opening a 24/7 childcare program. And when I was talking to the owner, asking how he was going to do it, what Marvin said is he had contracts with the airport authority, with some of the Fairfax-based auto manufacturing plants, and with several major hospital systems. So those large Kansas City-based employers were contracting for some of the slots and guaranteeing a guaranteed rate of pay. In return, they were carving out a certain number of slots for children of their own employees. We've got a number of different models where employers can be at the table and participating as partners in various situations like that. We also have employers that have on-site childcare for their own employees. We have school districts doing that for their employees. You know, we welcome, in our mixed delivery system approach, we welcome faith-based, community-based, for-profit, nonprofit. If you're going to open up safe licensed care that's good quality, we want you on our team. So we are trying to get everybody at the table. And I meant to make one point about this supply-demand report. You will see somewhere on here, there is a column for desired capacity and next to a column for licensed capacity. And I want to explain what that means. That means the facility is licensed for a maximum number of children. But when it comes to how many children a given provider desires to care for, that is where you see the difference. So we have more licensed slots in the state than we have number of children enrolled, because providers may be licensed for more children than they really care to handle at the given time. So that could be a center that is short-staffed. That could be a home-based provider that is just like, I'll take 3. I know I'm licensed for more, but I just want 3 little ones. So that is part of the provider preference, and that creates a difference between licensed capacity and the number of children receiving care.
Melissa, you've touched on, in here, you've touched a couple of times on the role that child care plays in economic development. You had some comments in the earlier caucus that, you know, without child care, none of that happens. And I don't know, do you want to expand on that a little?
Well, I think that's it in a nutshell. You can bring all of the greatest manufacturing and business entities to the state. You can help existing Kansas companies expand. You can do all of that economic development work in the world. But if they're, at the end of the day, if the employees that those companies need do not have safe, quality care for their children, they cannot show up for work. And we've got a program. KCSL is the state lead on a Power to the Profession, as KPOP is the acronym. It is all about helping businesses understand how they can become more family friendly. It is a menu of about 19 different recommendations that any type of business can do something on that list. So it isn't that everyone has to do every one of the things, but you can make it, you know, if your business model lends itself to be more flexible with schedules so that a parent of young children can get to the doctor's appointment or the parent-teacher conference or the, you know, whatever the activity is that their kids are engaged in, employee satisfaction rises and attendance levels improve, because retention levels improve, because you have a happier parent who is able to juggle. So there are, you know, that range of options, it runs the gamut, and it's up to and including some of those big concepts of contracting for care or running on-site care, or just helping federally. Employers have the ability to create flexible spending accounts that are for care services. So whether it's senior care or child care or, you know, care for a family member with special needs, you can create a pre-tax savings account out of your pay, put it in just like a health savings account operates. If that employer makes a contribution, so much the better, because that improves the amount of money on offer, and that activity would qualify that employer for the business tax credit that we passed. So there is a lot of variety into the range of private sector opportunities to be good partners and to help improve the employability of the parents they need in their workforce. So I just put that pitch in that this is a key part of our state's economic development approach.
Well, thank you. You know, we're from all over the state, and hear a lot of anecdotal stories of different efforts being made. Everybody, I mean, we all mean well. We all want to be part of the solution. I was invited by a group from my district that they were going to go visit a daycare provider in Red Cloud, Nebraska, because they are doing it right, and bring that model back. And I was unable to go, so I'm not sure what Red Cloud, Nebraska is doing right.
I don't know. I can make some inquiries. I know Nebraska has the Buffett Foundation, which helps underwrite a very successful nonprofit statewide program. So we should be so lucky. But there are we have really good community partners, foundations. We have the Dangy Hansen Foundation that covers 26 Northwest Kansas counties. We have community foundations all across the state. We've got some very heavy-hitting family foundations that all seem to recognize the importance of early childhood and are helping. So I would leave you with the same comment that I made when I had 2 minutes in your first meeting. Let me help you connect where you need to go. I was meeting Monday at DCF, and it was expressed that they had gotten an outreach from somebody that needed help, that it was actually KDHE's responsibility to provide. So if it's simpler, I'll be your connector. I'm not going to be the person answering the question that your constituent brings you or the idea that you have, but I certainly can make sure that you get connected where you need to go. So consider me a connector. Consider me somebody to ask for data and information, and we will endeavor to respond. And it will be, a whole of early childhood governance response. We will work together to bring you the information that you need.
Well, great. I mean, it's great to hear about a unified effort that's happening in Kansas. And Amanda's standing. So do you have something to add?
Really quick data clarification. I'm sorry, I was too quick to nod earlier, but while we're here, so thank you for the question around the number of school districts that offer preschool in the state. So we have 286 school districts, and all of them are required to provide preschool for students with disabilities. 262 is the number of our school districts who have approved preschool aged at risk programs, which means that they apply to the state to get additional funding through the school finance formula. So we run the data every year. Usually there's maybe 1 or 2 small districts that do not have preschool students enrolled in any given year, but I wanted to make sure that you had that piece. And you were quick to your next question, so.
Okay. So kind of to summarize, you've got a model that you're looking at for a smaller version, a smaller
Small center. Model. Yep.
And you're reviewing the rules and regs.
Yep. With the intention to have a plan of action. We're not just reviewing for the sake of reviewing. We will come up with a menu of actions that we proceed to put into changes that we actually address.
Yep. Okay.
We have a variety of projects underway to support the workforce. We are looking at, the agencies all have a participating role on the governor's task force in complement with private sector membership and legislative membership, so that we do this comprehensive review of the state governance system, because we think there's probably ways that we can improve the governance. And the governor's interest is in elevating early childhood so that there is a member of her cabinet focused on early childhood, and not just, the multiple secretaries who have that as part of their portfolio. Everybody involved recognizes the importance of it, but when your agency is coping with the biggest public health emergency of our lives, when your child welfare agency is dealing with the issues that they sometimes unfortunately have to deal with, appropriate attention shifts to dealing with the crisis and those difficult areas. And it's a little bit harder to maintain the focus when everything around you is kind of taking precedence. So, and we don't argue when attention has to turn, it has to turn. It's important.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and also thank you to KDHE and KSDE and DCF for all being here. Sorry. have to spit out all those letters. Okay, committee, we are going to wrap it up for today. Monday, the agenda is not out yet, but we are planning to have a hearing on Monday on a bill that establishes the Office of the Child Advocate. And that is Bill 2443, is that right? 2443, and that would be the House version. The Senate passed a bill on the Senate floor at turnaround. But this is a different bill. And I introduced this one in appropriations, so we can hear it after turnaround. And then Wednesday, planning to have an informational hearing on foster care and mental health. So that's next week. We'll see you then. We're adjourned.